What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to build a budget-oriented gaming PC that's perfect for 1080p and even a little bit of 1440p gaming. A system that has parts you can actually buy right now. Yeah, I can't believe it either. And is going to provide great performance for anywhere between $800 and $900 overall. Let's do this. The Deepcool Assassin 4 VC Vision is here with a digital screen, support for Intel and AMD sockets, as well as an enhanced vapor chamber for cool temperatures. Dual mode cooling allows you to optimize for noise levels or performance, while a 120mm outer and 140mm inner fan keep your temperatures low. A quad segment display rounds things off for monitoring key system metrics. Learn more and pick one up for yourself at the links down below. Now, we should probably begin by talking about the state of the GPU market, because if I had to give one word to label things right now, I'd say it's a bit of a clusterfuck. The good news is that there are some decent budget graphics cards available. And currently, if you're looking for a GPU below $300, you've got a few main options. The first being NVIDIA's RTX 4060, the second being AMD's RX 7600, the third being the Intel Arc B580, and the potential fourth option being the announced but sort of not yet released RTX 5060. Now, the Intel Arc B580 is currently my favorite of those cards. We haven't got the RTX 5060 to test yet, and you can't buy one, which kind of exempts it from this build, though it's likely once that lands, it may provide the better performance of the four cards. We obviously just don't know how much it's going to cost, and it still has issues around video memory. This card, the Intel Arc B580, doesn't. This has got 12GB of video memory and actually brings a decent GPU to the market from Intel. If you saw their first generation Intel Arc release, you probably won't have been very impressed, but a lot has changed since then. And in terms of driver stability, across the board, things are very good. Now, I've gone in this build for this Intel limited edition design. This is sort of their equivalent of NVIDIA's Founders range. But to be honest with you, any Arc B580 you can get your hands on is what I'd suggest. Full transparency, in the UK right now, you can buy the B580 for at or below MSRP. In the US, things are a bit more difficult. And I think some of the tariffs and general GPU shortages have just caused a lot of people to panic buy. Luckily, you can still get these. You'll just pay a little bit over MSRP. And I'll link latest pricing for Amazon and Newegg at the affiliate links down below. Now, for today's build, I've gone for the last gen, and I say that quite loosely, Ryzen 5 7600 Non-X. Now, you may also want to consider the 7500F, which is like an AliExpress exclusive. It's actually decent compared to lots of the things on AliExpress, but personally, for the slight extra bit of cash, I would go for this. AMD have since updated this CPU with the newer 9600 Non-X, but you don't get that much more performance. And to be honest, at 1080 and especially 1440p, a higher end CPU just isn't going to make that much difference with the B580. And when you consider the cost it would add to the build, it's in my opinion just not worthwhile. As far as cooling goes for the Ryzen 5, I'm going to go for the Vetroo V5, but if you want to shave some more cash, you can stick with this, the AMD stock cooler that comes included with the Ryzen 5 7600. The reason that I would choose to get rid of that and go for something like this instead is just that it provides better performance at a price that isn't going to break the bank. The stock cooler is perfectly adequate, but adequate's the word I'd use. I wouldn't call it good, I wouldn't call it great, it's certainly not fantastic. The Vetroo V5 comes in for anywhere between $20 and $30 pounds at the time of filming, and is currently the best value tower air cooler on the market. Cooler Master occasionally have something to contend with this in their Hyper 212 lineup. Johnsbro also have a few options here, but Vetroo tends to be my preferred shout. And it fits with a lot of build color schemes. Simple ARGB fan, which uses the standard 5V header, and of course, a nice black heatsink. Very, very simple. RAM and SSD is another area I've kept things simple and focused on cost. Crucial's P3 Plus is a pretty affordable 1TB Gen 4 drive. Basically, it's quick, cheap, and available in different capacities. While I've also gone for this Team Group T-Force Vulcan memory. Now, this is a non-RGB kit. You can see it's a lot more simple than the likes of a DDR5 G-Skill kit or a design from Corsair. It's also really low profile, which means the air cooler here is going to have no problems. And you can see, very simple, very basic, but perfectly adequate. If you can, try and make sure the DDR5 kit you pick has at least a 6000 megahertz or mega transfer speed with a CAS latency below below 36. The closer to 30, the better. Let's move next to the motherboard. I might as well walk you guys through all the parts in this build before I go ahead and put it together. This is the ASRock B650 M Pro RS. It's a micro ATX motherboard that just does everything that we need at an affordable price. Now, it's available in a Wi-Fi or a non-Wi-Fi derivative. That's going to depend on what you need in your build. If you've got Wi-Fi, you've not got any wide internet connection, spend the extra money. Alternatively, you can get a Wi-Fi dongle if you want one. Personally, I'd go for the Wi-Fi board just because it gives you that option out the box. The only downside really with this motherboard is that there's not loads of CPU power delivery. Totally fine for a Ryzen 5 7600. Not going to work for a 12-core, 16-core Ryzen 9 chip. And the smaller micro ATX size doesn't leverage the full ATX form factor of the case. The case I've gone for is compact, so I don't think it's going to look silly, but it is something I think that is worth pointing out. So let me talk about the case. This is from one of my favorite case brands at the moment. I am, of course, talking about Montech. And before anyone says,
oh, hashtag ad, he's been paid!
Montech have paid, they haven't paid me any money. They sent me the case, which is very nice of them. They haven't paid us any money. It's not paid, it's not an ad, I'm not financially invested in selling you this case. However, it is basically the same as their existing XR case, but it's got this cool little wood paneling on instead, which is quite nice, and gets rid of the glass panel for a mesh panel instead. Now, the internal layout and tooling is very similar to what you're going to expect from a lot of budget Montech cases, with a nice integrated power supply shield, a trio of ARGB fans at the front, and there's even room if you wanted to mount the fans on the inside for, I guess, extra intake. That's a hangover from the fact this uses the same tooling as the glass-fronted XR. So something in a budget case you're just going to have to live with. And as far as airflow goes, I guess it probably helps. There's not a great deal to say about the back of the case. It's got front panel cables, ARGBs pre-ran. Quite simple, really. And of course, down the bottom here, we have got a little bag of accessories, cable ties and screws. And I don't understand why brands still give you this. A speaker, if for whatever reason you want the world's smallest, beepiest speaker. Finally, to wrap things up, power supply, I've gone for a basic 650 watt unit from MSI. This is the A650BN, and it's a budget-oriented, non-modular, fairly compact 650 watt PSU. No complaints from me on the parts in this build. I think all these parts are going to work really well and be pretty efficient price-wise, which means the next stage is showing you guys how to put this system together. The first step is going to be installing the CPU into the motherboard. Now, to do this, you want to go ahead and just remove the CPU from its plastic sleeve. And you can see here, if you take a quick look at the processor, there's a golden triangle in one corner. Now, this golden triangle is going to match up perfectly with one of the triangles on the CPU socket. In particular, I am of course talking about this one just here. Now, that means that the triangle on the CPU should be pointing to the top left corner of the motherboard. Now, handily in our build, and in I think pretty much every scenario, this means that the Ryzen text should read upright. So if I drop the chip into place, a little something like so, you can see the triangle is actually lined up, the Ryzen text is upright, and I'm going to return the socket cover down. Don't take the black plastic off just yet, but get the socket cover resting so it feels like it's in the right position, and then push the arm down. The black plastic will pop off, but keep this safe in case you ever need to RMA the motherboard, send the motherboard back, or anything along those lines. As far as the RAM DIMMs here are concerned, this board has 4 DIMMs, which is really, really useful. These 4 slots are going to give you some good upgrade paths down the line, which is nice to see. I've only got 2 RAM DIMMs though, 16 gigs in each, giving the 32 gig total, meaning I don't need all 4. Instead, I'm going to be using the second and fourth, and they're the slots you should use too. Why? Because that's going to give you the dual channel performance that adds memory bandwidth to the build. Line the RAM up, the little golden bottom contact piece here is notched, so it only goes in one way round. Often the nice looking side of the memory will be visible this way, with, if I spin the RAM round, any labels or markings facing towards the CPU where they're less likely to be seen. I'm also going to do the M.2 drive at this stage, and for that you'll need to locate the M.2 slot just here. I'm going to unscrew the M.2 heatsink that comes pre-installed onto the motherboard before sliding the drive in at a 45-degree angle, securing it down and popping the heatsink back into place. The final thing to install onto the motherboard assembly is this, the CPU cooler. The cooler installation is going to vary depending on the cooler you've gone for, but I'll walk you through exactly how to install this one. Luckily for me, I've used this cooler before, and these silver brackets are pre-installed. If they weren't, you just need to screw them on and secure them with 4 screws, 2 of course on each bracket. The main thing to check with these is the bracket orientation. You've got to make sure that these points are pointing in or out exactly as the manual suggests, and make sure that you check that the portion of the manual you're reading is for the AMD or Intel socket you've gone for. You can see here there is some movement movement in these screws as well. Now these are moved depending on the exact socket you've gone for, so again ensure the positions these are in are correct. For me, it's the lower positions of the top two and the upper positions of the bottom two to bring these 4 screws as close together as possible. You're also going to find a copper contact plate. This is what's going to actually enable the heat transfer from the CPU into the heatsink. Make sure this is clean, make sure there's no plastic cover on there, and make sure there's thermal paste between this and the CPU itself. Now the thermal paste you're going to need should always come included in a little bag in your CPU cooler box. So I'm going to dig mine out, add some onto the CPU, and then secure the cooler into place. Note the lack of fan, as that's going to go on later. Once the cooler's on, you're then going to have yourself what we call a completed motherboard assembly, with room for the graphics card and then obviously all the cable and wiring connections you're going to possibly need. Discard the motherboard box for now, but you can't go ahead and just install the board straight into the case. Now if this was an ATX board and this was an ATX case, which it is, that would be fine. But because this board is smaller, the standoffs are actually going to be in the wrong locations. I'll show you now with a close-up which ones need to be removed and where new ones need to be added. And you get a little standoff tool included in the bag of case screws and accessories, including extra standoffs, so you can adjust these and make sure it's right. The main thing is making sure that under each motherboard hole there's a standoff with no extras before securing it nice and easily into place. 3 screws at the top, 3 along the middle, and 2 down the bottom in the case of this ASRock motherboard. The board is in and looking good. Next thing is cables and wiring. It can be tempted at this stage to go, yeah, let's put the GPU in, let's finish the build off, but then your cable and wiring gets difficult. So don't do that. Do the power supply and all the front panel cables at this stage. And here's exactly how you do it. Now this power supply is non-modular, which makes things nice and easy because we haven't got to decide what cables we do or don't need to plug in. Why? Because they're all already plugged in. Now what you need to do is spin the case around to the rear, and you can see here we've got plenty of room for the power supply to be installed. Now in this case you can go for an either fan up to pull air out of the case or fan down to pull air from under the case. If you've got this on a carpet, you'll want to go fan up because that will restrict airflow, but I've got it on a table. So for me, fan down is going to be absolutely fine. Slide that in there, get it lined up, and then locate your bag of power supply screws, which you're going to use to secure the power supply into place. As far as what cables are plugging into where, I'm going to start with the motherboard cable, which is the biggest. That's going to go to the right-hand side of the board into the corresponding power connector, followed by the CPU power cable, which goes up to the top left, and is a collection of 8 pins that can actually split into a pair of 4. I'm then going to go ahead and wire up the front panel cables, so that includes the HD audio, which goes to the bottom left. It's got a pin blocked out, so it only goes in one way round. The USB 3 Type A and Type C. The Type C connector is smaller overall and more metal. And they're going to finally finish off with the front panel header down the bottom right. The final thing I am going to do is also wire up the fan and ARGB headers from the case pre-managed and pre-wired fans up to each corresponding port on the motherboard itself. I'm then going to finish off by adding the fan for the cooler back into place and plugging the cable for the fan and RGB in for this at the same time. The final stage after that is the GPU, and this is the bit that, let's face it, is most exciting. I always start by hovering the card in. Why? Because it allows me to see which of the PCI lane covers I'm going to need to remove. Looking at this case, it's the top 2 in this build. So you can see here we've got one right at the top. Make sure you push back the notch on the top PCI slot and then slide the card into place. Yeah, bit of pressure, get it clicked in, and then you're going to add the same screws you actually took out to remove those PCI lanes to fasten the card back into place. Just make sure at this stage as well you kind of hold it up if you need to prevent GPU sag. This Arc card is very lightweight, so realistically it's not going to be a problem. I'm then going to finish things off by wiring up the 6+2 pin PCI power connector to the GPU, and that's the system built. In theory, if I grab this power cable and plug it in, the system should actually power on for the first time. Here we go. Fans are spinning and they're lit up. Is that the same for the cooler? Yes, it is. And all of this will be controllable through the motherboard in sync. So give me a few moments to get this looking nice and pretty, and then we'll take a look at those all-important performance metrics. Looking at performance though, which is ultimately the most important thing, especially on a budget build where you can see real differences in the results, and today we tested primarily at 1080p. Now you can see from the results on your screen that actually frame rates look really good. Now some games are lower than others. Take Call of Duty's Black Ops 6 for example, where at 1080p high, the build only just surpassed that crucial 60 FPS mark, and was much lower than the 100-120 frames a lot of people will like in competitive titles. Now some games were better. Cyberpunk 2077 for example at 1080p high rasterization pulled in 120 frames per second on average, and Apex Legends at 1080p high surpassed the 200 FPS mark. Arc still has some troubles when it comes to game optimization, but is broadly getting a lot better, and for me the 4 gigs of extra VRAM just provides a little more future-proofing than what you'll find on the likes of an RTX 4060. What do you guys think of this build? Let us know in the comments below. Get subscribed to see more from me. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.